The words hung in the air like shattered glass, each shard cutting deeper than the last. You're becoming a burden, Mom. Maybe it's time we looked into assisted living options. My son Derek stood in my kitchen, the kitchen where I'd taught him to make pancakes on Sunday mornings, where we'd celebrated every birthday, every promotion, every milestone of his life. His designer suit probably cost more than I spent on groceries in 3 months, and his tone carried the practiced patience of someone addressing a confused elderly person who couldn't possibly understand modern realities. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I am Margaret Chun, 64 years old, and until 3 minutes ago, I believed my son still saw me as his mother rather than an inconvenience to be managed. The coffee I'd been pouring stopped midstream, creating a small brown puddle on the counter that neither of us moved to clean. Outside the window, Seattle's spring rain drummed against the glass, a soundtrack to the dismantling of my maternal illusions. Derek shifted his weight, his Italian leather shoes squeaking slightly against the linoleum I'd scrubbed just yesterday. It's not personal, Mom. Amanda and I have been talking, and with the new baby coming, we just don't have the bandwidth to keep checking on you. These places are actually quite nice now. They have activities, people your own age. He pulled out his phone, already swiping to show me glossy photos of what looked like a hotel lobby. This one in Tacoma has great reviews. They do yoga classes and book clubs. The coffee continued dripping, forgotten. I stared at my son, this man I'd raised alone after his father Richard died when Derek was only 8. Richard, my brilliant husband who'd been a software engineer back when Seattle was just beginning its tech boom, before the city became what it is now. Richard, who'd left us comfortable but not wealthy, who'd worked himself into an early grave at 42, leaving me with a young son and a modest life insurance policy. Bandwidth, I repeated, testing the word. Is that what they call it now? Derek's jaw tightened, that familiar gesture he'd inherited from his father, the one that appeared whenever he felt cornered. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. You're getting older. Last week you called me because you couldn't figure out how to update your phone. The week before you needed help with your internet router. Amanda's tired of the constant calls and honestly so am I. We have our own lives, our own problems. Amanda, my daughter-in-law of 6 years, who'd never quite warmed to me, who scheduled our holiday visits like business meetings and timed them with her phone. Amanda, who worked in finance and viewed everything, including family relationships, through the lens of efficiency and return on investment. I tried in the beginning to bond with her, to welcome her into our small family. I'd failed, apparently, at being the kind of mother-in-law who could be loved or even tolerated. I see, I said quietly, finally setting down the coffee pot. And where would I go while you arrange this assisted living situation? Well, obviously you'd stay here until we find the right place. Derek pocketed his phone, already moving toward the door, already mentally checking this unpleasant task off his list. But we should start looking soon. These good facilities have waiting lists. After he left, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, listening to the rain, watching the afternoon light fade into evening. The house settled around me, this modest 3-bedroom Rambler in Ballard that I bought 30 years ago when the neighborhood was still affordable, before it became trendy, before the coffee shops and boutiques transformed every corner. This house where I'd raised Derek, where I'd grieved Richard, where I'd built a quiet life as a high school math teacher, retiring 5 years ago with a decent pension and the satisfaction of having shaped young minds for 3 decades. My phone sat on the table silent. I picked it up, scrolled through my contacts, stopped at a name I hadn't called in months. Grace? It's Margaret Chun. I know it's been a while, but I need to ask you something. Do you still have connections at Morrison & Associates? Grace Wu had been Richard's best friend, his colleague at the startup they both worked at in the early 90s. She'd gone on to become a successful patent attorney while I'd chosen the steadier path of teaching. We'd stayed in touch over the years, though less frequently as our lives diverged. Margaret. Of course, honey. Tom Morrison and I go way back. What do you need? I need to know about intellectual property rights, specifically about software patents filed in the 90s. And I need complete discretion. There was a pause, then Grace's voice came back, sharper, more focused. This is about Richard's work, isn't it? About the code he wrote before he died? Yes, I said simply. I think it's time I understood exactly what my husband left behind. The next morning I sat in Grace's downtown office, looking out at Elliott Bay where ferries cut white paths through gray water. The file she placed before me was thick, filled with technical language I only partially understood, but the numbers were clear enough. Patents, licensing agreements, royalty structures. Richard's code, the elegant solutions he created for data compression and encryption, had become foundational to an entire generation of software. Your husband was a genius, Margaret, Grace said, sitting across from me. These patents have been generating income for 30 years. The original company that held them was acquired twice, and each time, the licensing agreements transferred. According to these documents, you've been receiving quarterly payments into an account Richard set up before he died. Quarterly payments, I echoed. Grace, I've never seen any quarterly payments. She frowned, pulling out another document. The account is at Seattle First Bank, opened in 1993. The statements go to a P.O. box registered in your name. She looked up, her expression troubled. You really didn't know about this? Richard handled all our finances, I said, slowly, memories shifting, rearranging themselves into new patterns. After he died, I found our regular accounts, our savings, the life insurance. But he'd been so sick those last months. If he set up something separate, something he meant to tell me about later, there wouldn't have been time. Grace's fingers flew over her keyboard. I'm looking at the account activity now through Morrison's database access. Margaret, there have been regular deposits for 30 years. The balance is currently at just over $9 million. The office seemed to tilt. That's impossible. It's not. And there's more. She turned her monitor so I could see. Derek is listed as a secondary account holder. He was added 8 years ago when he turned 30. That would have required your signature. But I'd never signed anything. I would have remembered. Unless Derek had forged my signature, which would have been easy enough to do. My mind raced backward, trying to remember 8 years ago. Derek had just started his business then, a tech consulting firm. He'd been stressed about startup costs, about finding investors. I'd offered to help, to take out a loan against the house, but he'd refused, said he'd found backing, that everything was handled. Can you trace where the money's been going? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Grace's expression grew grimmer as she clicked through screens. Large transfers out starting about 7 years ago. Some to a business account for Chan Consulting, that's Derek's company. Some to real estate purchases. A house in Madison Park, 2 investment properties in Capitol Hill, a vacation home in the San Juans. All registered to Derek Chan or to joint accounts with Amanda Chan. The coffee I'd drunk earlier turned to acid in my stomach. His house, the one where they live with their daughter, the one they just renovated. Purchased with a transfer from this account. $3.2 million paid in cash. Grace's voice was carefully neutral, lawyer trained not to show judgment, but I could see the anger in her eyes. Margaret, your son has been accessing this account for years. The business he owns, the assets in his name, they're all built on your money. Money you didn't even know you had. I sat back processing. Derek's success, his designer suits, his luxury cars, his dismissive attitude toward his aging mother, who needed help with her phone. All of it purchased with the fruits of his dead father's genius, with money that should have been mine, that was legally mine. What are my options? I asked. Legally? You can remove him from the account immediately. You can demand repayment, though proving he took the money without permission would be complex if he claims you knew about it. You can also change the account's beneficiary structure. Right now, everything passes to Derek upon your death. And the patents? The licensing agreements? They're in your name as Richard's widow and heir. The income will continue as long as the patents are valid and the software is in use, which according to these projections, could be another 20 years at least. The quarterly deposits average around $80,000. $80,000 every 3 months. $320,000 a year, accumulating for 3 decades while I'd lived on my teacher's pension, while I'd worried about affording property taxes, while my son had taken what he wanted and then called me a burden. Grace, I said slowly, I need you to help me with something. And I need it done without Derek knowing, at least not yet. She leaned forward, and despite the gravity of the situation, I saw a gleam of something almost like excitement in her eyes. I'm listening. Over the next 3 weeks, I put a plan into motion. Grace worked quietly, filing paperwork, restructuring accounts, preparing documents that would need to be executed at precisely the right moment. I went about my normal life, teaching my weekly volunteer tutoring sessions at the community center, tending my garden, living in the house Derek assumed I'd soon be leaving. But I also began watching my son more carefully, seeing him with new eyes. I accepted his infrequent phone calls, listened to his complaints about work stress, about Amanda's difficult pregnancy, about their nanny problems. I noted how he never asked about my life, my health, my plans. I was a checkbox on his to-do list, a responsibility to be managed and, if possible, outsourced. 3 weeks after that conversation in my kitchen, Derek called to say he'd found a place for me. It's perfect, Mom.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Bright and cheerful, right on the bus line so you can still get around. They have an opening next month. We should grab it before someone else does. That's wonderful, dear, I said, my voice warm and grandmotherly. Why don't you and Amanda come for dinner this Sunday? We should celebrate, and I'd like to discuss the arrangements. There was a pause, probably while he checked with Amanda, negotiated, compromised. Okay, 6 o'clock. But we can't stay late. Amanda's been tired. Sunday arrived with unusual sunshine for Seattle in April. I prepared Derek's favorite meal from childhood, the pot roast I used to make for special occasions, the one Richard had loved. I set the table with the good china, the pieces that had been my mother's. I even put out flowers from the garden, bright tulips that added color to the small dining room. Derek and Amanda arrived exactly at 6, punctual as always. Amanda's pregnancy was showing now, a neat bump under her designer maternity dress. She accepted my hug with the usual stiffness, her perfume expensive and overpowering. Derek kissed my cheek absently, already looking around as if assessing the house, perhaps calculating what it might sell for. Something smells good, he said, sounding surprised. I wanted to make it special, I replied, ushering them to the table. After all, we have a lot to discuss. Through dinner I played my role perfectly. The aging mother, a bit scattered, grateful for their attention. I asked about the baby, about their renovation plans, about Derek's business. He talked expansively about a new contract he just signed, about expanding into artificial intelligence consulting, about hiring 5 new employees. Business is booming, he said, refilling his wine glass. This year we're on track to clear $3 million in revenue. Not bad for a startup that began in a spare bedroom. Your father would be so proud, I said softly. He always believed in you. Something flickered across Derek's face, too quick to read. Guilt, perhaps, or discomfort at the mention of Richard. Yeah, well, Dad taught me to think big, to take risks. He certainly did. I stood, began clearing plates. Amanda, would you mind helping me with dessert? In the kitchen, away from Derek, I watched my daughter-in-law's careful movements, the way she checked her phone even while helping me slice apple pie. How are you feeling? I asked. Pregnancy can be so difficult. Fine, she said shortly. Tired, but fine. And you're happy about moving me into assisted living? Having that burden off your shoulders? She looked up sharply, perhaps hearing something in my tone. It's not about burden, Margaret. It's about appropriate care. You need more help than we can provide. Interesting, I said, because I don't recall asking for help. Before she could respond, I carried the pie into the dining room. Derek was on his phone texting, but he put it away when we entered. I served dessert in silence, let them eat, waited until they were comfortable and satisfied. So, Derek said finally, pushing away his empty plate, about the assisted living place. I've got the paperwork in the car. We just need you to sign a few things, authorize them to set up automatic payments from your pension. Of course, I said pleasantly. But first I have some paperwork of my own. Just a few things I'd like you to look at. I retrieved the folder Grace had prepared, placed it on the table between us. Derek opened it casually, probably expecting insurance forms or advance directives. I watched his face as he read, watched the color drain, watched his hand start to shake slightly. What is this? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. That, I said calmly, is a forensic accounting of your father's patent royalty account. The one you've been accessing for the past 8 years without my knowledge or permission. The one you used to purchase your house, your cars, and to capitalize your business. Amanda leaned over to look, her eyes widening. Derek, what is she talking about? The Madison Park house you live in, I continued, my voice steady. Purchased with $3.2 million from an account in my name. The Tesla in your garage, $120,000. The Audi Amanda drives, $85,000. Your vacation home on San Juan Island, $1.8 million. The initial capital for Chun Consulting, $2 million. Should I go on? I can explain, Derek said, but his voice lacked conviction. Please do. Explain how you forged my signature to add yourself to an account I didn't know existed. Explain how you've withdrawn over $8 million over the past 8 years. Explain how you've built your entire life on money that belonged to me, while treating me like a burden you couldn't wait to be rid of. Amanda stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Derek, is this true? Mom knew about the account, he said desperately. She told me I could use it. She said Dad would have wanted me to have it, to build something with it. That's a lie, I said flatly. Grace Wu has already provided testimony, along with handwriting analysis of the account authorization. You forged my signature. That's fraud, Derek. That's theft. His face crumbled, the successful businessman facade dissolving to reveal the frightened boy underneath. I was going to tell you. I just needed to get the business established first. I was going to pay it back. When? After you put me in assisted living and inherited the rest? After I was gone and couldn't ask questions? Amanda sank back into her chair, her hand on her belly, her face pale. Oh my God, Derek. What have you done? I built something, he said, anger flashing now. Dad's code was just sitting there, generating money nobody was using. I turned it into something real, something tangible. I created jobs, built a company, made something of myself. With my money, I said. Without my permission. While treating me with contempt and calling me a burden. Silence fell, broken only by the sound of rain that had started again outside. Derek stared at the papers, at the evidence of his years of deception laid out in neat columns and legal language. What happens now? He asked finally, his voice small. I pulled out another document, placed it in front of him. Now you have a choice. This is a promissory note for $8.4 million, the amount you've taken plus interest. You will sign over to me full ownership of your house, your cars, and 51% controlling interest in Chun Consulting. You will do this willingly, legally, with proper documentation. In exchange, I won't press criminal charges for fraud and theft. You can't do this, he said, but there was no force behind the words. That's everything. That's my whole life. Yes, I agreed. It is. The life you built with stolen money while planning to warehouse the mother who sacrificed everything for you. Amanda spoke up, her voice tight. If he signs this, where does that leave us? The baby? That depends on Derek, I said. On whether he's capable of learning what really matters, of understanding the difference between success and character. Derek's hands trembled as he picked up the pen I'd placed beside the documents. For a long moment he just held it, staring at the papers that would unravel everything he'd built. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry, Mom. Sorry you did it, or sorry you got caught? He flinched. Both. All of it. I don't know what I was thinking. It started small, just a loan I told myself I'd pay back, and then it got bigger and I couldn't stop and I couldn't tell you. You couldn't tell me because you knew it was wrong, I said. You couldn't face me because you knew I'd raised you better than this. He nodded, tears on his face now, this grown man crying in my dining room. What do I do? How do I fix this? You start by signing those papers. You start by taking responsibility for what you've done. And then, if you're willing, you start the real work of rebuilding, not a business empire built on theft, but a life built on integrity. His hand shook as he signed, page after page, transferring ownership of everything he'd accumulated back to me. Amanda watched in silence, her expression unreadable. When it was done, Derek pushed the papers across the table and buried his face in his hands. The house, Amanda said quietly. Our home. Where are we supposed to go? I looked at her, this woman who'd never warmed to me, who'd encouraged Derek to think of me as a burden, and I felt an unexpected flicker of compassion. She was pregnant, caught in the consequences of her husband's choices. That depends, I said, on what happens next, on whether Derek is capable of change, of earning back what he's lost. What does that mean? Derek asked, looking up with red-rimmed eyes. I gathered the signed documents, placed them carefully back in the folder. It means, my dear son, that while I now legally own your house, your cars, and controlling interest in your company, I'm not interested in destroying you. I'm interested in teaching you what your father tried to teach you, what I tried to teach you, what you forgot in your pursuit of success. Which is, that family isn't a burden to be managed. That wealth without character is worthless. That the things that matter can't be bought or sold. I looked down at them both. You'll stay in the house for now. You'll continue running the company, but under my oversight. And you'll complete a condition of my own, one that will determine whether you ever regain what you've lost. What condition? Amanda asked, suspicion and hope warring in her voice. That's a conversation for another day, I said. Tonight you need to go home and think about who you want to be. What kind of father you want to become. What kind of man you want your child to know. After they left, I sat alone in the quiet house, the signed papers on the table before me. Outside, Seattle's rain continued its steady rhythm, washing the streets clean. I thought about Richard, about the code he'd written that had generated wealth he never lived to see, about the son he'd loved, who'd lost his way. The phone in my pocket buzzed. A text from Grace. It's done. Everything's been filed and recorded. The assets are legally transferred. How are you holding up? Better than expected, I typed back. Phase 1 complete. Tomorrow we start Phase 2. Because I didn't want Derek's money or his house or his company. I wanted something far more valuable. I wanted my son back. The rain continued through the night, and I slept better than I had in weeks, secure in the knowledge that tomorrow would bring a new beginning, one built not on deception, but on the hard work of rebuilding what had been broken. The assets Derek had accumulated, the wealth he'd stolen, would become tools for teaching him what I should have taught him better in the first place. That love isn't a burden. That family is treasure. That the only legacy worth leaving is one of integrity, compassion, and the courage to do what's right, even when it costs everything. Monday morning arrived with the kind of clarity that only follows a storm. I stood in my kitchen, the same kitchen where Derek had called me a burden just 4 weeks ago, and poured coffee into the mug Richard had given me on our 10th anniversary. The ceramic was chipped now, faded from decades of use, but I'd never been able to part with it. Some things I'd always believed gained value through time and love rather than losing it. My phone rang at precisely 8 o'clock. Grace, always punctual. The ownership transfers were filed with King County on Friday, she said without preamble. Everything's official. You now own a Madison Park mansion worth $4.5 million in the current market, 2 Capitol Hill rental properties generating $12,000 a month in income, a San Juan Island vacation home, Derek's Tesla and Amanda's Audi, and 51% of Chun Consulting, which was valued at $6 million in last year's tax filings. I sat down, the weight of these words settling over me like a heavy coat. And Derek knows he can't reverse any of this? Not without your signature. Margaret, you've effectively taken control of his entire life. His home, his transportation, his livelihood. Everything he thought he owned is now yours. Grace paused. The question is, what are you going to do with it? That was the question, wasn't it? Revenge would be simple. I could evict Derek and Amanda, sell everything, keep the money my son had stolen and leave him with nothing. The law was entirely on my side. He'd committed fraud, theft, forged my signature on legal documents. I could destroy him with a single phone call to the prosecutor's office. But I hadn't raised my son to abandon him when he fell. I'd raised him to understand consequences, to learn from mistakes, to find his way back to the person he was meant to be. Richard would have expected nothing less. I'm going to offer him a chance, I said finally. The same kind of chance his father would have given him. Which is, I'll draw up the terms today. Can you meet me at Chun Consulting's office tomorrow morning? 9 sharp? Grace's laugh was warm despite the early hour. Wouldn't miss it for the world. Margaret Chun, reluctant business owner. This should be interesting. After we hung up, I spent the morning at my desk, the one in the small room that had once been Richard's home office. His books still lined the shelves, technical manuals on programming languages that were probably obsolete now, mixed with philosophy texts and poetry collections. Richard had believed that the best engineers were also humanists, that code without ethics was just zeros and ones. I pulled out a legal pad, the old-fashioned kind, and began writing. Not on a computer where words could be easily deleted and revised, but in pen where every word carried weight and permanence. The terms of Derek's redemption took shape slowly, carefully, each condition chosen not to punish but to teach. By noon I had a framework. By 3 I'd refined it into something that felt right. By 5, when the doorbell rang, I had a complete document ready. Derek stood on my porch, shoulders hunched against a light drizzle, looking smaller somehow than he had just 2 days ago. The confidence that had always surrounded him like armor had cracked, leaving him vulnerable and uncertain. "Mom," he said quietly, "can we talk?" I stepped back, let him in. He moved through the house he'd grown up in like a stranger, careful not to touch anything, as if he'd lost the right to casual familiarity. In the living room, he sat on the edge of the sofa where he'd spent countless hours as a boy, doing homework, playing video games, reading books I'd assigned him from my teaching curriculum. "Amanda and I talked all night," he began, not meeting my eyes. "About everything. About what I did, how I justified it, how I convinced myself it was okay." He looked up finally, and I saw genuine anguish in his face. "I don't know how to fix this, Mom. I don't even know where to start." "That's why I asked you to come," I said, sitting across from him in Richard's old reading chair. I handed him the document I'd prepared. "These are my terms." He took the papers with trembling hands, began reading. I watched his face as he processed each condition, saw confusion give way to understanding, then to something that might have been hope. "I don't understand," he said finally. "You're not taking everything away?" "I already took everything away," I corrected gently. "Those papers you signed transferred legal ownership. What I'm offering now is a path back, if you're willing to walk it." Derek read aloud, his voice halting. Condition 1. Derek Chun will continue as CEO of Chun Consulting, drawing a salary of $60,000 annually, the average starting salary for his employees. Any salary above this amount will be donated to Seattle Youth Tech Education programs. "You were paying yourself $400,000 a year," I said, "while your newest hires made $55,000. You're going to learn what it's like to live on what you pay others." He nodded slowly, continued reading. Condition 2. Derek Chun will spend 20 hours per week for the next 12 months working directly with nonprofit organizations serving Seattle's homeless population, including but not limited to meal service, shelter assistance, and job placement programs. "You called me a burden," I said. "You need to understand what real burdens look like, what it means when people actually have nothing, when they actually need help." His eyes were filling now, but he pushed on. Condition 3. Derek Chun will attend weekly family counseling sessions with Margaret Chun, facilitated by a licensed therapist, for a minimum of 1 year. "We need to talk," I said simply. "Really talk. Not the surface conversations we've been having for years, but honest discussions about your father, about loss, about what went wrong between us." Condition 4. Derek read, his voice breaking. Derek Chun will document his experience in a private journal to be shared with Margaret Chun monthly, detailing his emotional journey, challenges faced, and lessons learned. "I need to know you're actually changing," I said. "Not just going through motions, but genuinely growing." He set down the papers, wiped his eyes. "And if I complete all this, what then?" I pulled out a second document, handed it to him. "After 1 year, if you fulfilled these conditions in good faith, if the therapist confirms genuine progress, if I see real change, then we'll discuss transferring the assets back to you. Not all at once, but gradually as you prove you understand their true value. And if I refuse, if I say this is too much, too hard, then you can walk away right now. I'll sell everything, keep the money, and you can rebuild from nothing. It's your choice, Derek. It always has been." He stared at the documents in his hands, at the roadmap I'd drawn for his redemption. Outside, the rain intensified, drops racing down the window like tears. "Why are you doing this?" He asked finally. After everything I did, everything I said. Why give me another chance? Because you're my son, I said simply. Because your father loved you, and he would want me to help you find your way back. Because the alternative, leaving you to drown in your own mistakes, would make me exactly what you accused me of being. A burden on your conscience. Derek laughed, a broken sound somewhere between a sob and genuine humor. That's not what I meant when I said it. I know what you meant. You meant I was inconvenient, that my needs interfered with your comfort, that caring for me required effort you didn't want to expend. I leaned forward. But real burdens, Derek, aren't people who need us. Real burdens are the weight of our own choices, our own failures, our own betrayals. Those are the things that crush us. He nodded, tears flowing freely now. I'll do it. All of it. Whatever it takes. It won't be easy. $60,000 a year in Seattle with a pregnant wife and a Madison Park mortgage, even one you're not paying, means adjusting your lifestyle considerably. No more expensive restaurants, no more luxury purchases, no more casual extravagance. The house, he said suddenly. The mortgage, the property taxes. How am I supposed to afford that on $60,000? You're not, I said calmly. I'll cover the mortgage and taxes as the legal owner. You'll pay utilities and maintenance. Consider it part of your education and actual costs versus perceived wealth. Derek processed this, nodded slowly. And the company? How does it work with you owning 51%? Grace Wu will serve as my representative on the board. Any major financial decisions require her approval, which means my approval. You'll run day-to-day operations, but the era of using company funds as your personal bank account is over. You'll submit to quarterly audits, full transparency on all expenditures. That's fair, he admitted. More than fair, actually. Mom, I know you don't believe me right now, but I really am sorry. Not just for getting caught, but for what I did, for how I treated you. Sorry is a start, I said. But it's just words. The next year will show me if you mean them. After Derek left, I sat in the quiet house, feeling Richard's presence more strongly than I had in years. What would he think of what I'd done, of the terms I'd set? Would he approve of this mixture of justice and mercy, punishment and redemption? My phone buzzed. A text from Amanda. Thank you for not destroying him. I know he doesn't deserve your kindness. Neither do I. But our baby deserves a father who's learned to be better. I'll make sure he follows through. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. The baby deserves parents who understand what really matters. Help him learn that, Amanda. Help him become the man his father was. The next morning, Grace and I arrived at Chun Consulting's offices in a sleek building in South Lake Union, surrounded by other tech companies, startups, and the gleaming headquarters of larger corporations. The office suite itself was impressive, modern furniture and expensive artwork, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. He spent a lot of your money making this place look successful, Grace observed, taking in the designer coffee machine, the pool table in the break room, the catered breakfast spread in the kitchen. Derek was already there, looking exhausted, as if he hadn't slept. With him were 3 other people. A woman in her 30s with kind eyes and a tablet, a young man with glasses and nervous energy, and an older gentleman with gray hair and a weathered face. Mom, Grace, this is Sarah Kim, my operations manager. David Park, head of development. And Tom Rodriguez, chief financial officer. Derek's voice was formal, professional. I've called this meeting to introduce the company's new majority shareholder and to outline some organizational changes. The 3 employees exchanged glances, clearly confused. Sarah spoke first. I thought you were the sole owner, Derek. I was mistaken about that, Derek said, his voice steady despite the color rising in his cheeks. My mother, Margaret Chun, is actually the primary investor and owner of this company. I've been operating under her capital, and recent events have clarified the actual ownership structure. Tom, the CFO, frowned. This is highly irregular. The books show your personal investment as the startup capital. The books are wrong, Grace interjected smoothly, pulling out documents. The original $2 million in funding came from the Richard Chun Trust, which is solely owned and controlled by Margaret Chun. Derek Chun was acting as a trustee, but that authority has been revoked due to mismanagement of funds. I'm Grace Wu, Mrs. Chen's attorney, and as of today, her representative on this company's board. David, the young developer, looked like he might be sick. Is the company in trouble? Are we being shut down? Not at all, I said, speaking for the first time. The company will continue operating, but with new oversight and some changes to how funds are allocated. Your jobs are secure, your salaries won't be affected. In fact, you might see some improvements. Sarah, the operations manager, studied me with sharp intelligence. What kind of improvements? For starters, the budget line item for executive compensation will be revised, Grace said, pulling up a spreadsheet on her laptop. Derek's salary will be reduced to $60,000 annually, bringing it in line with entry-level positions. The savings, approximately $340,000 per year, will be redistributed to employee benefits, professional development, and a new profit-sharing program. The three employees stared. Tom spoke carefully. That's a significant change. May I ask what prompted this restructuring? Let's just say, Derek said quietly, that I lost sight of what matters. My mother is helping me find my way back. Over the next 3 hours we reviewed every aspect of Chun Consulting's operations. Grace's forensic accounting had revealed disturbing patterns beyond the initial theft from my account. Company credit cards used for personal expenses. Client billings inflated beyond actual hours worked. Employee expense reports denied while Derek approved his own lavish expenditures. This consulting trip to Hawaii, Grace said, pointing at an entry from 6 months ago. $15,000. But according to the client files, all meetings were conducted via video conference. Derek slumped in his chair. That was actually a vacation. I charged it to the company. Sarah's face hardened. I requested approval for a training conference in Portland last year. You denied it, said the budget was too tight. It would have cost $800. I know, Derek said miserably. I'm sorry, Sarah. That was wrong. David leaned forward. Are you saying the company is actually in better financial shape than Derek led us to believe? Much better, Grace confirmed. Without the drain of inappropriate expenses, Chun Consulting is quite profitable, which means there's room for the changes we're implementing. By lunch, we'd outlined a new organizational structure. Grace would serve as board chair, reviewing all financial decisions over $10,000. Tom would report directly to her in addition to Derek, creating accountability. Sarah would be promoted to Chief Operating Officer with a salary increase. David would receive the training budget he'd been requesting for his team, and a new position would be created, Ethics Compliance Officer, to ensure company practices aligned with legal and moral standards. I have a candidate for that position, I said. If you're willing to consider an unconventional choice. Who? Derek asked. Me. The room fell silent. Derek stared. You want to work here? But you're retired. I'm 64, not dead, I said dryly. I spent 30 years teaching math, which means I understand numbers and I understand ethical behavior. I'll work 20 hours a week, reviewing processes, ensuring compliance, and helping rebuild the culture of this company. Sarah, who I was beginning to like quite a bit, smiled. I think that's an excellent idea. No offense, Derek, but this place could use someone who isn't afraid to call out problems. None taken, Derek said, though he looked shell-shocked. So my mother will be working here. My mother will be my colleague. Your mother will be your boss, technically, Grace corrected. As majority shareholder. Get used to it. After the meeting, as employees filtered out, Sarah lingered. Mrs. Chun, can I speak with you privately? We stepped into a small conference room. Sarah closed the door, her professional demeanor slipping to show genuine concern. I've worked for Derek for 4 years, she said quietly. He's brilliant at client relations, at seeing the big picture, at selling the vision. But lately, the last year especially, he's been different. More distant, more focused on appearances than substance. Some of us wondered if something was wrong. Something was very wrong, I confirmed. But we're working on fixing it. The changes you're making, they're good. Really good. The staff will respond well. Sarah hesitated. But Derek needs to be on board, genuinely on board, or it won't work. He needs to believe in what you're doing, not just comply because he has to. That's perceptive. I'm good at reading people. It's why Derek hired me. She smiled slightly. Also why I knew something was off. Mrs. Chun, I hope this works. Derek has potential to be really great, if he can get out of his own way. That's exactly what I'm hoping to help him do, I said. Sarah, I'm glad he had you here, keeping things running while he was lost. After Sarah left, I found Derek alone in his office staring out at the lake. The view was spectacular, the kind of vista people paid millions to see from their homes. He'd built this, created something real. But he'd done it on a foundation of lies. Your first counseling session is tomorrow, I said from the doorway. 4 o'clock with Dr. Patricia Lim. She specializes in family therapy and has experience with financial betrayal cases. You've already set it up. I don't believe in wasting time. I came into the office, sat in one of his guest chairs. Derek, Sarah said something interesting. She said you've been different this past year. More distant. Did something happen that I should know about? He turned from the window, his expression raw. You want to know when it started? The stealing, the lying, the justification? Yes. It was at Dad's grave, he said quietly. On the anniversary of his death 5 years ago. Amanda and I were trying to get pregnant, and the doctors said we might need IVF, which wasn't covered by insurance. It would cost $40,000 we didn't have. He sat down heavily. I went to Dad's grave and I just broke down. Told him I didn't know what to do, that I was failing, that I needed help. And then I remembered something he'd said once about setting up accounts for the future, about patent royalties. I'd never thought about it again after he died, but that day I wondered. So you searched, I said. I hired a private investigator, actually. Asked him to look into Dad's patents to see if there was money somewhere. When he found the account, when I saw how much was there, it felt like Dad answering me. Like he was saying, here, take this, use it. But you didn't tell me. I convinced myself you knew, that you'd just forgotten about it, that with your teacher's pension you didn't need it. He laughed bitterly. The lies we tell ourselves. I knew you didn't know. I knew what I was doing was wrong. But once I'd taken that first $50,000 for the IVF, it got easier. And when Amanda got pregnant and then miscarried, I took more. For comfort, for distraction. To build something that would make the loss hurt less. The business, I said, understanding dawning. Yeah, Chun Consulting became my obsession. Every success, every client, every dollar earned felt like proving something to Dad, to you, to myself. That I wasn't just Richard Chen's son, I was my own man. He met my eyes. Except I wasn't. I was a thief living in a house I stole, driving cars I stole, running a company built on stolen money. We sat in silence, the weight of his confession settling between us. Outside, Seattle continued its busy day, oblivious to our small drama. The IVF, I said finally. It didn't work. Not the first time. We tried 3 times over 2 years, spent $120,000 total. Finally succeeded with Amanda's current pregnancy. He looked down at his hands. I told myself I was doing it for family, for creating the next generation, for giving you a grandchild. Another lie. I was doing it for me, for what I wanted. Derek, if you'd told me, if you'd asked, I would have helped with the IVF. I would have taken out a loan, sold the house if necessary. I know. That's what made it worse. Knowing I could have asked, should have asked, but instead I stole. He stood, paced. Mom, I don't know if a year is enough to fix this. I don't know if a lifetime is enough. Maybe not, I agreed. But it's a start. And Derek, what you just told me, that honesty, that's the first real step toward changing. That evening, I made my first entry in what I decided would be my own journal, parallel to the one I'd require Derek to keep. If I was going to guide him through this journey, I needed to document my own process, my own struggles with anger and forgiveness, with justice and mercy. Day 1, I wrote. I took control of my son's life today. Not because I want power, but because he'd lost his way so completely that someone had to intervene. Richard, if you're watching, I hope I'm doing right by our boy. I hope the path I've set him on leads where he needs to go. The doorbell interrupted my writing. Amanda stood on the porch, her pregnancy visible now even under her coat, her face pale and drawn. I need to talk to you, she said without preamble. I let her in, made tea, waited while she gathered her courage. I knew, she said finally, the words tumbling out. Not everything, but enough. I knew Derek was accessing some account I didn't understand. I knew the money for the house came from somewhere other than his business profits. I didn't ask questions because I didn't want to know the answers. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm complicit, she said, her hands wrapped around the tea mug. Because I benefited from what he did, lived in the house it bought, drove the car it purchased. Because I pushed him to provide more, be more, achieve more. I made him feel like what he had wasn't enough. I studied my daughter-in-law, seeing her clearly perhaps for the first time. You're afraid I blame you. Don't you? If I hadn't been so demanding, so focused on status and appearances, maybe Derek wouldn't have felt he needed to steal to keep up. Amanda, Derek made his own choices. You didn't force him to forge my signature or take money that wasn't his. I paused. But you're right that you contributed to an environment where appearances mattered more than integrity. She flinched but didn't look away. What do I do now? How do I help him change when I need to change too? You start by being honest. With him, with yourself, with me. I set down my tea. Why did you marry Derek? The question caught her off guard. I loved him. Love him. He's smart and funny and ambitious. And wealthy, I added gently. Yes, she admitted after a long pause. And wealthy. Or I thought he was. My parents struggled financially my whole childhood. I swore I'd never live like that. Never worry about bills or debt or making rent. Derek seemed stable, successful. He seemed safe. But safety isn't the same as partnership, I said. And wealth isn't the same as security. I'm learning that. She looked down at her belly, her hand protective over the growing life. This baby deserves better than parents who value money over character. I want to be better, Margaret. For Derek, for our child, for myself. Then you'll need to do your own work, I said. The conditions I set for Derek are his path. You need to find your own. Tell me how. We talked late into the evening, Amanda and I, about values and priorities, about the difference between wanting comfort and needing luxury, about raising children to understand that their worth isn't measured in possessions. By the time she left, we'd sketched out her own journey, parallel to Derek's but distinct. She would return to work after maternity leave, despite Derek's insistence that she stay home. She would volunteer with organizations serving low-income families, learning from the communities she'd always looked down on. She would attend therapy, both individual and couples, working through her own fears and insecurities. And she would apologize to me, not just in words but through actions, by becoming a true partner in Derek's redemption. Thank you, she said at the door, for not giving up on us. Thank you for being brave enough to face the truth, I replied. After she left, I returned to my journal, adding a new entry. Amanda surprised me tonight. I'd written her off as shallow, as part of Derek's problem rather than part of any solution. But people are rarely so simple. She's scared and flawed and complicit, but she's also willing to change. Maybe that's all any of us can ask for. The willingness to look honestly at ourselves and do the hard work of becoming better. The next day began Derek's first real test. I drove to the Madison Park house at 6 in the morning, using the key I now legally possessed as the property owner. Derek answered the door in pajama pants and a t-shirt, looking confused and half asleep. Mom? What are you doing here? Condition 2, I said cheerfully, handing him a travel mug of coffee. 20 hours a week with homeless services. Your first shift starts at 7. Now? But I have a client meeting at 9. Then you'd better hurry. We need to be at the Union Gospel Mission in 20 minutes. Derek scrambled to get dressed while I waited in his sleek, modern living room. Everything was tastefully decorated, expensive without being ostentatious, the kind of home featured in design magazines. A home he'd bought with my stolen money while calling me a burden. He emerged 10 minutes later, dressed in jeans and a plain shirt, looking nothing like the polished executive I'd seen yesterday. I've never done anything like this before, he admitted as we drove toward Pioneer Square. I know. That's the point. The Union Gospel Mission occupied a large building in one of Seattle's grittiest neighborhoods. Inside, dozens of people lined up for breakfast, their faces weathered by hard living, their clothes worn and often inadequate for the rain. The smell was overwhelming, body odor and damp clothing and desperation mixed with the institutional scent of industrial cleaning products. Derek's face went pale. A staff member named Carlos, stocky with kind eyes and tattooed arms, greeted us with enthusiasm. "Margaret! Good to see you. This must be Derek." Carlos shook Derek's hand firmly. "Your mom's been volunteering here for 3 years, every Saturday morning. She's one of our best." Derek stared at me. "You volunteer here? Since when?" "Since I retired," I said simply. "I needed something meaningful to do with my time." "Carlos, where do you need us today?" "Serving line," Carlos said, handing us aprons. "Derek, you'll work the main dishes. Margaret, you're on coffee and conversation as usual." For the next 3 hours, Derek served breakfast to a constant stream of people experiencing homelessness. He ladled oatmeal and eggs, placed bread on trays, learned to make eye contact and offer basic dignity with each interaction. I watched him struggle with his discomfort, saw him flinch when hands with dirt-blackened nails reached for the food, noticed him step back when someone with obvious mental illness spoke to him in nonsensical sentences. But I also saw him begin to adjust. Saw recognition dawn when a man in a torn jacket thanked him with elaborate courtesy. Saw compassion flicker when a woman with 3 small children apologized for needing extra portions. Saw his face change when Carlos explained that the elderly man who'd been rude and demanding was a Vietnam veteran with untreated PTSD and nowhere else to go. During a brief break, Derek sank onto a folding chair in the staff room, looking exhausted despite it only being 10 in the morning. "This is what you do every week?" he asked. "By choice. This is what people who actually need help look like," I replied. "This is what real burden means. Not a mother who needs occasional assistance with technology, but human beings trying to survive with nothing." I had no idea it was like this. Most people don't unless they look. It's easier to ignore, to cross the street, to pretend invisible people don't exist. I sat beside him. "You called me a burden, Derek, because in your world anyone requiring effort or attention is a burden. These people can't even get most of society to acknowledge they exist." He nodded slowly, processing. "How did you start volunteering here?" "Your father and I used to volunteer together years ago before he got sick. After he died, after you moved out and I retired, I needed to feel useful. I remembered how meaningful it felt to serve, to help, to see people not as problems but as humans deserving dignity." I paused. "I found more purpose here in 3 hours each week than you found in building a multi-million-dollar company." "That's harsh, Mom." "It's true. Purpose isn't about success or wealth or status. It's about connection, contribution, making a difference in ways that matter." Carlos stuck his head in. "Break's over. We've got the lunch crowd starting early today." Derek groaned but stood, retied his apron, went back to the serving line. This time I noticed he stood a little straighter, made more eye contact, offered small kindnesses. When a woman dropped her tray, spilling food everywhere, he came around the counter to help her clean up and personally prepared her a new meal. Small steps, but steps nonetheless. After the shift ended, Derek was quiet on the drive back to his house. Finally, as I pulled into his driveway, he spoke. "I'm sorry," he said, "for what I said about you being a burden. I didn't understand. I didn't understand anything." "No," I agreed. "You didn't. But you're learning." His client meeting had started without him. Sarah had stepped in, she texted, and was handling things fine. Derek sent back thanks and an apology, then added, "Tell them I was doing something more important." That afternoon at 4 o'clock precisely, Derek and I sat in Dr. Patricia Lim's comfortable office, surrounded by soft lighting and gentle artwork designed to put clients at ease. Dr. Lim herself was a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked black hair and an expression of calm attentiveness. "Thank you both for coming," she began. "Margaret, you've outlined the situation in our preliminary call. Derek, this is your chance to share your perspective." The hour that followed was painful and necessary. Derek talked about his childhood as an only child, about losing his father young, about the pressure he'd put on himself to succeed, to make Richard proud, to prove he was worthy of the sacrifice his mother had made. I listened to him describe me as simultaneously loving and intimidating, supportive and demanding, present and somehow distant. "You were always so capable, Mom," he said at one point. "So independent and strong. After Dad died, you didn't fall apart. You kept working, kept providing, kept everything running smoothly. I never thought you needed anything from me. Everyone needs connection, Dr. Lim observed gently. Even capable, independent people need to feel valued by their children. I did value her, Derek protested. I just thought she was fine, that she had her life figured out. But you didn't really look, I said quietly. You assumed, but you didn't ask. You didn't notice that I was lonely, that the house felt empty, that I wanted to be part of your life in meaningful ways. I didn't want to be a burden, he said, and then stopped, hearing his own words. I didn't want to burden you with my needs, so I assumed you didn't have needs either. Dr. Lim leaned forward. That's an important insight, Derek. The fear of being a burden can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. We avoid closeness to avoid neediness, but in doing so, we create distance that makes real connection impossible. We unpacked this for another 40 minutes, with Dr. Lim guiding us through decades of unspoken expectations and missed communications. The session ended with homework. Derek would write a letter to me about what he needed from our relationship moving forward, and I would write one to him about the same. This is just the beginning, Dr. Lim said as we prepared to leave. Rebuilding trust and connection takes time. But both of you being here, being willing to do this work, that's significant. In the parking lot, Derek paused by his car, the Tesla that was now technically mine, registered in my name, insured under my policy, but that he still drove daily. Tomorrow morning, I said. 6 a.m. We're at a different shelter. Pack a lunch. The shifts are getting longer. He nodded, no complaints, just acceptance. As I watched him drive away, I felt a flutter of hope. The journey was just beginning, but Derek was walking it. That counted for something. 11 months passed like water over stones, slowly reshaping everything it touched. I stood in the conference room at Chan Consulting, watching through the glass walls as Derek led a presentation to potential clients. His suit was off the rack now, not designer, and his confidence came from competence rather than bravado. Sarah sat beside him, their partnership genuine after months of working together under the new structure. Grace appeared at my elbow, holding her tablet. The quarterly audit is clean. No discrepancies, no questionable expenses. Derek's been living on his $60,000 exactly, not a penny over. And the company performance? Up 18% from last year. Turns out when you treat employees well and operate ethically, productivity increases. Grace smiled. Who knew? I've been working at Chan Consulting 3 days a week for nearly a year now, reviewing processes, meeting with staff, ensuring the culture Derek had corrupted was being rebuilt with integrity. The employees had embraced the changes. Turnover dropped to 0. Client satisfaction scores reached record highs. The business thrived not despite the reforms, but because of them. My phone buzzed. A text from Derek. Finished at Sacred Heart. 20 hours complete for the week. See you at Dr. Lim's? Sacred Heart was the 5th shelter Derek had rotated through, each one teaching him different aspects of service and humility. He'd progressed from awkward discomfort to genuine connection, learning names and stories, advocating for resources, using his business skills to help residents with job applications and interview preparation. Carlos had told me last week that Derek was the most dedicated volunteer they'd ever seen from the corporate world. The therapy sessions had been harder. Dr. Lim pushed us to confront painful truths, to voice resentments buried under years of polite distance. I'd learned that Derek felt abandoned when I'd poured myself into teaching after Richard died, using work to escape grief rather than sharing it with my son. He'd learned that his drive for success was partly an attempt to fill the hole his father's death had created, to prove himself worthy of a love he'd never doubted but somehow couldn't feel. Amanda had joined us for several sessions, adding her own perspective, working through her fears about money and security. She'd returned to her finance job, was volunteering at a women's shelter, and had started a blog about redefining success. The baby, a girl they'd named Rachel, had arrived 3 months ago, healthy and beautiful. I'd held my granddaughter in the hospital, seen Derek's face as he cradled his daughter, watched something fundamental shift in him. Parenthood had completed what the year of service had begun, teaching him that the most valuable things couldn't be bought or stolen, only given and received freely. Dr. Lim's office felt familiar now, comfortable. Derek and I settled into our usual spots, the awkwardness of early sessions long gone. This is our final scheduled session, Dr. Lim began. Unless you both feel we need more time, today is about evaluating progress and discussing next steps. Derek looked at me. I've been thinking about that. About what happens when the year is up. As have I said. I wrote something, Derek said, pulling out his journal, the one he'd faithfully maintained for 11 months. A letter like the homework from our first session but bigger. Can I read it? Dr. Lim nodded. I braced myself, uncertain what was coming. Derek opened to a marked page, his hand steady. Dear Mom, a year ago I called you a burden. Those words haunt me now, not just because they hurt you, but because they revealed how lost I'd become. I'd built a life that looked successful but was hollow at its core. I'd accumulated wealth I didn't earn and respect I didn't deserve. I'd forgotten everything Dad tried to teach me, everything you showed me through your example. His voice caught, but he continued. This year has been the hardest of my life. Working for a salary that barely covers expenses, spending mornings serving people society ignores, sitting in this office facing truths I'd rather avoid. It's been exhausting and humbling and absolutely necessary. I understand now what you were trying to teach me, that real wealth is measured in relationships, in integrity, in the difference we make in others' lives. He looked up, met my eyes. I know the year is almost up. I know according to our agreement we're supposed to discuss transferring assets back to me. But Mom, I don't want them. The house, the cars, the company shares, they're yours. They were always yours. What I want is something I can't take, something you have to choose to give. What's that? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Your trust. Your respect. A real relationship, not the superficial one we had before. I want to be your son again, not just by blood but by earned connection. Tears streamed down his face now, unchecked. I want Rachel to know her grandmother, to learn from you what I forgot. I want to help you. Not because you're a burden but because you're my mother and I love you. I want to deserve the second chance you gave me. Silence filled the room, heavy with emotion. Dr. Lim handed Derek a tissue box, her own eyes suspiciously bright. I prepared transfer documents, I said finally, pulling papers from my bag. Legal paperwork to return 50% of what you lost. The house would become jointly owned, the company shares split more evenly, one car returned to your name. Derek shook his head. I don't want them, Mom. I don't need them. We're doing fine on what I earn. The house you own has become a home because of what we've learned, not what it cost. The company is better with you and Grace providing oversight. And honestly, knowing I don't own these things, that they're privileges I could lose again, keeps me honest in a way I need. You've more than fulfilled the conditions, I said. You've earned back what you lost. Maybe I earned back my integrity, Derek countered. But the material things, those don't matter anymore. What matters is sitting here with you, having honest conversations, being present for the small moments I used to ignore. What matters is teaching Rachel that her grandfather was a brilliant man who valued character over success, and that her grandmother was strong enough to save her father from himself. Dr. Lim spoke gently. Margaret, how does this make you feel? Proud, I said, surprised by how much I meant it. And grateful. Derek, I didn't do this to punish you. I did it to reach you, to break through the walls you'd built. If you found what you needed, then the mission succeeded. I found more than I needed, Derek said. I found my way back to what matters. But Mom, I have a request. Use the assets for something meaningful. The rental properties could house families transitioning out of homelessness. The vacation home could be a retreat for shelter workers who need rest. The company could expand its internship program for disadvantaged youth. Make the money do good, the way Dad would have wanted. That's a beautiful idea, Dr. Lim said. Margaret, I've been thinking along similar lines, I admitted. Richard's patents generated this wealth. Using it to help others, especially in technology education and homeless services, would honor his memory. But Derek, you'd help me? You'd be involved in these projects? I'd be honored to, he said. As your son, not as someone trying to profit. As a partner in making a difference. We sat together, the three of us, as Dr. Lim guided us through final reflections. The sessions had worked, she confirmed, not just in resolving the immediate crisis but in fundamentally altering how we related to each other. The therapy could end, but the relationship would continue, healthier and more authentic than before. After the session, Derek and I walked to a nearby park, settling on a bench overlooking the water. The Seattle skyline glittered in the distance, a city transformed by technology and wealth, by ambition and innovation. Richard had been part of that transformation, his code literally building the foundation for modern software. Now his legacy would support people the transformation had left behind. "I need to tell you something," Derek said. "Something I learned about Dad while researching his patents." "What's that?" He knew. About the account, the money accumulating. "He set it up specifically for you, with instructions that you weren't to know until after his death. He wanted you to have security without the burden of managing it while grieving. The lawyer who executed his estate was supposed to contact you 6 months after the funeral. But he never did." "He died," Derek said quietly. "Heart attack 3 months after Dad passed." The files went to a junior partner who didn't know the significance, who just maintained the account without reaching out. When I found it years later and added myself, I rationalized that Dad would have wanted me to have access, that I was following his intentions. Another lie I told myself. So Richard meant for me to have it all along. Yes. And Mom, I read his instructions to the lawyer. He wrote that he trusted you to use it wisely, to help others, to live generously. He knew you'd do more good with the money than just sitting on it for security. You're doing exactly what he hoped. We sat in comfortable silence, watching boats traverse the sound, joggers pass on the path, life continuing around us in its infinite complexity. Richard had left us both a gift. Not just money, but an opportunity to learn what truly mattered. It had taken years and pain and hard work to understand, but we'd finally gotten there. "I should get home," Derek said eventually. "Amanda's parents are visiting, and Rachel gets fussy if I'm not there for bedtime." "Before you go," I said, pulling a small box from my purse, "I have something for you." Inside was Richard's wedding ring, the simple gold band he'd worn every day of our marriage. I'd kept it safe all these years, unable to part with it but uncertain what its future should be. "Dad's ring," Derek breathed, taking it reverently. He wore it as a symbol of commitment, of promises kept, of love that endures beyond difficulty. "I want you to have it, not as an heirloom to possess but as a reminder. Every time you see it, remember what you've learned this year. Remember that integrity matters more than success, that connection matters more than wealth, that being needed isn't the same as being a burden." Derek slipped the ring onto his right hand. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting all along for this moment. "I'll wear it every day," he promised. "And when Rachel is old enough, I'll tell her about the grandfather she never met, about his brilliant mind and generous heart, about the code he wrote and the lives he touched. I'll tell her about her grandmother who refused to let her father stay lost, who loved him enough to take everything away so he could find what really mattered. Tell her we're all works in progress," I said. "That making mistakes doesn't define us, but how we respond to them does. Tell her family is complicated and beautiful and worth fighting for." We stood, embraced, no longer just mother and son fulfilling obligations but two people who genuinely loved and valued each other. The journey from Derek's cruel words to this moment had been painful and transformative, had cost us both something but given us back more than we'd lost. As Derek walked away, his father's ring glinting in the afternoon sun, I pulled out my phone. Grace answered on the first ring. "It's done," I said. "Derek doesn't want the assets back. We're moving forward with the foundation plans." "The Richard Chun Foundation for Technology Education and Housing Stability," Grace said, satisfaction in her voice. "I've already drafted the nonprofit paperwork. Margaret, you're about to put $9 million to work changing lives." "Not me," I corrected. "We. Derek will help Amanda too. Even little Rachel will grow up knowing her family's wealth came with responsibility to others." That evening, alone in my small house in Ballard, I opened the final envelope from Richard's instructions, the one marked to be read when everything else was complete. His handwriting, forever frozen in time, spoke to me across the years. "My dearest Margaret, if you're reading this, then you've discovered the account and the money I couldn't bring myself to tell you about while I was alive. I was a coward about that, I confess. I didn't want my death to be about money or plans or practical matters. I wanted our final months to be about love, pure and simple. But I knew you'd need security, would want to help others, would turn this unexpected wealth into something meaningful. You always did see possibilities where I saw only problems. Whatever you've done with the money, I know it was right. Whatever path you've chosen, I trust it completely. You were the best decision I ever made, Margaret Chen. Loving you, building a life with you, that was my greatest success. The code I wrote, the patents I filed, the money they generated, all of it is footnotes to the real story, which is simply that I loved you and you loved me, and together we created something beautiful. Take care of our boy. He's got my brain but your heart, which means he'll do remarkable things if he doesn't get lost along the way. Guide him, challenge him, love him through whatever comes. And Margaret, live fully. Don't let my death shrink your world. Expand it, embrace it, fill it with purpose and connection and joy. That's what I want for you, what I've always wanted. All my love, always and forever, Richard. I set down the letter, tears streaming freely now, but they were tears of gratitude rather than grief. Richard had known me, trusted me, loved me enough to plan for my future even as his own ended. And Derek had found his way back, learned the lessons his father had tried to teach, become the man he was meant to be. The journey from burden to blessing had been long and difficult, but we'd walked it together and emerged transformed. That was legacy enough, wealth enough, success enough for any life. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.